o'clock. This is Sky News at 10 live from Los Angeles. Residents brace for more wildfires as dangerous winds pick up again, and we question authorities about their response.
When we are past this period, there will be an evaluation of everything that went on.
So that was the living room, that was the...
How old are you, Fred?
I'm 80.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
I haven't seen something this bad, no.
Also tonight on Sky News at 10, the man accused of being the reason Kiana Dawes took her own life is cleared of manslaughter, but convicted of the coercive control of his partner.
I just wish with all my heart that I could bring her back and say, it's okay, you're safe now.
Joe Biden says they're on the brink of a ceasefire deal for Gaza, lifting hopes for an Israeli hostage release, with talks on final details expected tomorrow. And the Prime Minister promises Britain will be an AI superpower, hoping to reboot a flatlining economy. And we'll take a first look too at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Hello, good evening. Here in Los Angeles, the fires have been burning for nearly a week, engulfing the homes of tens of thousands of people. Those people are now displaced. 24 people have died, and that number is expected to rise. The strong Santa Ana winds pick up, and crews are getting ready for new fires. Still, the issue of immediate response by the authorities is in question. And earlier, I asked the mayor for her reaction to those criticisms. We'll have more on that later in the programme. Investigations are only just beginning into the cause of the Palisades fire, the biggest and most difficult to contain so far. They're not ruling out a connection to a fire on New Year's Eve in a similar location, believed to have been sparked by fireworks. While contained by officials, the embers could have reignited days later in harsh Californian winds. Authorities pointed to the first signs of smoke along the Temascal Ridge on the 7th of January. From there, the fire grew quickly, doubling in size in 24 hours and continuing to spread uncontrollably over the course of a week. The latest data today shows the Palisades fire with a perimeter of more than 37 miles. And it's one of three major wildfires still tearing through Los Angeles. California's fire department says it's contained 95% of the fires in Hearst, 33% up in the northeast at Eaton, but only 14% of the Palisades fire. And it's from there that our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports.
It's the loneliest of missions, but one so many here are doing.
It is hard to see this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Fred is a car mechanic who moved here from post-war Europe. He left home with only his passport last Tuesday afternoon, returning 6 days later to this.
I put a special fireplace in there, you know, so that was the living room, that was the...
How old are you, Fred?
I'm 80.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
I haven't seen something this bad, no. I mean, I was born in Germany, and I saw buildings where they were destroyed, but nothing like this.
The blue skies here are incongruous with the wreckage on the ground, but this ravaged city isn't in the clear. Dangerous winds are forecast overnight and a warning issued for potential explosive fire growth.
We are right back into a red flag condition. So those conditions are expected to go all the way through until Wednesday around 6 o'clock at night. We want people to know that just because they're not seeing smoke and fire, that when these winds pick up, we could have 70-mile-an-hour gusts still. so that could start right back up.
Firefighters here are on guard for hotspots in the rubble. An investigation is ongoing into what caused the blazes.
We have created a Los Angeles Regional Wildlife Investigative Task Force. And while their work is still in the early stages, we're committed to identifying the cause and origin of these fires, and we're also committed to holding anyone who's responsible for these fires accountable.
This fire started in the mountains above Pacific Palisades, at the head of a hiking trail popular with teenagers, walkers and tourists. Police are keeping vigil round the clock here. This is where authorities believe this fire that devastated so many lives began. This now a potential active crime scene. Arson hasn't been ruled out. Privately, officials are saying they believe this disaster was human-made. A resident providing me with this picture of a fire in the exact same area on New Year's Eve. Some believe it could have been reignited by ferocious winds. And amid the misery, a miracle of sorts. This man lost his house, but is reunited with his dog who survived. A brief period of respite tackling these fires is coming to an end. This community braced once more for a danger which is so devastatingly clear.
And Martha is in Pacific Palisades and she joins me now. And Martha, all people can really do now is watch and wait.
Yeah, this feels almost like the calm before the storm at the moment, Jane. It's very still, very quiet here. I can hear birds tweeting in the trees beside me, but there is this overwhelming sense of foreboding because of these weather conditions that are forecast over the next couple of days. The National Weather Service issuing this rare warning for potential explosive fire growth, and that's because the winds are expected to pick up. The firefighters over the last couple of days have benefited from a lull in the wind strength, but they're now expecting winds up to 70 miles per hour, gusts up to 70 miles per hour. That's not as strong as the 100 miles per hour winds which we saw last Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning, which really fueled this disaster. But it is very significant indeed, and that's why you see the authorities at pains to stress to people in this local area that the danger has not passed, that they aren't out of the woods yet, that despite the fact that there's no active fires that can be seen today, no smoke in the air to speak of either. So they're just trying to ensure that people remain vigilant to the ongoing threat of fire. And all this is against the backdrop of this ongoing door-to-door search of the wreckage areas for more potential fatalities, with almost 24 people reported missing.
Thanks very much, Martha. As Martha was saying, no fire noticeable, but we're still seeing firefighters damping down embers, even close to where we are here, where there's been no active fire for days. And that is to try and prevent these embers reigniting when the wind picks up. Well, that is it from LA for now, but we'll be back at the end of Sky News at 10 with my questions to authorities about what happened here and if some of the blame lies with them. Anna.
Jane, thank you. Kiana Dawes was just 23 years old when she took her own life. After dropping her baby daughter at a friend's house, she left a note on her phone blaming her partner. Ryan Wellings was accused of driving Kiana to her death after 2 years of domestic violence and abuse. Today, he was cleared of her manslaughter, but was found guilty of assault and coercive control. A warning: this report from Sky's North of England correspondent Charlotte Leeming has references to suicide.
Hello? You all right?
Pregnant and scared, police footage captures Kiana Dawes after she reported her partner for domestic abuse.
Kiana, what's happened? He's down.
Before you got out?
No, he's downstairs with my colleague.
Preston Crown Court heard that this man, Ryan Wellings, subjected her to years of violence and coercive, controlling behaviour. In July 2022, she left their baby daughter on a friend's doorstep and took her own life. A suicide note on her phone blamed him for her death. "I was murdered," she wrote. "I fought till the end. Ryan Wellings killed me." Today, he was cleared of her manslaughter but found guilty of assault and controlling and coercive behaviour. Kiana's mother, Angela, said she hoped the verdict would help protect others.
I truly hope that no other young lady or child has to go through what he did to my daughter and her baby. And I just wish with all my heart that I could bring her back and say, it's okay, you're safe now.
A few days before Kiana died, she called police to her flat one last time. Her face covered in blood, she described the attack.
He's here.
Outside the flat?
I'm here.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably around like this area where he's hit my head.
Yeah.
I've obviously...
So he's pushed the door into you, has he?
Yeah, he smashed the door straight off me.
Right.
And...
You've passed out here then?
I've passed out here.
Please, have a sit down with him.
Wellings cried when he was later arrested. He told the trial he never abused or assaulted Kiana, that he only ever restrained her, that he wasn't responsible for her death, denying all charges against him. But the court heard that Kiana had made notes on her mobile phone detailing the abuse and physical assault that Wellings had subjected her to. He threatened to drill her teeth out of her mouth and had repeatedly threatened to make her life hell.
The availability of digital evidence from mobile phones, recordings that we now have of victims giving their account to the police has meant that we are able now to gather evidence which perhaps in the past we weren't able to do.
Kiana documented her injuries and reached out for help numerous times. In her suicide note, she also wrote, "I hope my life saves another by police services acting faster." This case has really put Lancashire Police under the spotlight. An independent investigation by the police watchdog has examined the contact the force had with Kiana. As a result, 3 officers now face disciplinary hearings, 2 of them for misconduct and 1 for gross misconduct. The Crown Prosecution Service say Wellings has shown little remorse for his actions towards Kiana, but his conviction today will serve as a stark warning to other abusers who use coercive and controlling behaviour on their partners. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Preston Crown Court.
And if you've been affected by this story, you can contact the Samaritans anytime on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. Let's go to the US now. Just a week away from the inauguration of Donald Trump, Joe Biden gave his final policy speech today. He thanked the people of the State Department and praised his own record, saying America is now stronger and its competitors are now weaker. It came ahead of major talks tomorrow in the Middle East over a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas.
On the war between Israel and Hamas, we're on the brink of a proposal that I laid out in detail months ago, finally coming to fruition. We're pressing hard to close this. The deal we have structured would free the hostages, halt the fighting, provide security to Israel, and allow us to significantly surge humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians who've suffered terribly in this war.
Well, let's speak now to our US correspondent, Mark Stone. And Mark, envoys for both Biden and Trump are in Qatar. There's an urgency to this now, just a week away from that official handover of power.
Yeah, and it's striking that the officials for both the outgoing administration and incoming one are working hand in glove. I was at an event this morning with Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, who was quite clear that they are buoyed by the fact that the incoming administration of Donald Trump is working closely. They are in Qatar, both sides are in Qatar at the moment, trying to hammer out the final details of a deal, the contours of which have been in place for many, many months. But the final 10% of that deal has been so hard to reach. Well, it does look tonight as though we are closer than ever, that there really is sign of a breakthrough that we may see in the next day or two, that we'll see 33 hostages being released by Hamas, and on the other side, Palestinian prisoners being held in jail in Israel being released as well. That would be the first phase of a deal that would have many phases and would be very, very difficult long term to achieve. But what it would achieve is the release of hostages and a form of peace, temporary as it may be, for the people of Gaza. So for Joe Biden, for his legacy that he was trying to mould today, trying to cement a legacy in foreign policy, this would be a key piece of a complex jigsaw. He put some serious topspin on what he sees as his foreign policy successes, not just as president but for 4 years, but as vice president for 8 years, and as a key foreign policy senator in that building for 4 decades before that. He's putting topspin on what has been a very difficult 4 years in the foreign policy realm.
Mark, with that update, live in Washington, thank you. Sir Keir Starmer says the government will mainline AI into the veins of the UK, making Britain an AI superpower. The Prime Minister promised investment, jobs and economic growth due to a boom in the sector. But his big launch was overshadowed by news of the economy, being buffeted again on the borrowing markets and questions about the future of his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby, has this report.
The Prime Minister at a laboratory in East London to see artificial intelligence in action, hoping new technology can reboot Britain's flatlining economy.
AI isn't something sort of the future over the next hill. It's the present. It's already here, in Britain, changing lives. A chance to turbocharge growth, create the companies of the future, and radically improve our public services.
The PM with a promise to supercharge Britain's digital economy by 2030 with more computer firepower, special AI growth zones and a pledge to use public data to wire artificial intelligence into our hospitals and schools.
Mark my words, Britain will be one of the great AI superpowers.
But for now, Britain's economic outlook grim. UK borrowing costs are at the highest since the financial crisis. Investors are worried about massive borrowing and flat growth. How is it changing your calculations on accelerating AI?
The number one mission of this government is economic growth, and that was run through the budget. But there's much more that we're doing on economic growth, pulling those levers of change.
The PM refusing to rule out spending cuts later in the year.
In terms of the ruthless approach when it comes to finances and spending, yes, we will be ruthless.
But the Conservatives having none of it.
The broader issue for the Labour Party and the Labour government is that they continue to talk down our economy. And so if you want AI to drive our economy forward, to grow our economy, you need investors to be with you, you need investment sentiment to be strong, and it just isn't right now.
And this technology already changing our lives.
I think the Prime Minister talked about a lady with a stroke condition in his speech this morning. And what's happening there is that it has so many different data sets of what has happened in stroke situations that it can make rapid comparisons far faster than a human diagnostician or clinician can make. What it doesn't answer is the fact that we don't have, for example, enough nurses or enough doctors or enough beds.
Today was meant to be his big pitch about how to turn the UK into an AI superpower in order to boost growth and transform public services. That's what it was meant to be. But instead, the Prime Minister found himself having to defend a Chancellor under fire as the UK economy takes a battering from markets nervous about massive debt and anemic growth. A PM desperate to deliver on his promise of national renewal, betting that AI can kickstart growth. But with the Chancellor on the ropes and the budget still backfiring, it's hard to get past the gloom. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's get more on all of that now. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, is here with me, and our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is in Downing Street. So, Tom, to you first of all then, the Prime Minister talking of an AI revolution. You know, what are the practicalities of that? What does that look like in reality?
Well, as a plan, you can see why they really embraced this full on compared to the AI safety fears that we're all dealing with not much more than a year ago. You know, Labour wants to grow the economy. We're already really good at AI in this country. Some of the best AI companies in the world outside the US are located here. We just won a Nobel Prize for it, for heaven's sake. The efficiencies it could bring to the public sector. If teachers can get their admin done using AI, they can spend more time with pupils. Same goes with nurses and patient-facing role that they do. And also, they're about to re-engineer the power grid here in the UK. One of the big concerns as people grow their AI infrastructure is the amount of energy these supercomputing sort of facilities use that you can plan and manage at this stage. You can also send a clear signal to the industry, come in, the investment environment's wonderful, come here. But there's some big obstacles, right? First of all, you need to win public trust. One of the most valuable assets the UK's got is the data on its population, particularly healthcare data. Big tech companies are desperate to get their hands on that. Are we willing to give it up? We won't unless we can see real benefits either to us or the economy. Then you've got adoption. UK companies are still lagging behind, and managers and bosses, the US when it comes to using even these earliest AI tools. They have to stimulate that, change thinking here. That's a tougher challenge. But more to attract businesses, I think you have to show more than just a direction of travel. You need to be able to ensure that they can invest here. That comes down to things like taxes. And on top of that, you've got skills. And right now, the visa environment in the UK is not great for attracting those skilled sort of AI pioneers, the young people they need to help work in these firms.
OK, well, Sam, the speech today was certainly optimistic about the future, about the prospect of growth for the economy. The reality is feeling very different right now.
That's right, Anna. The Prime Minister talking about the potentially transformed technological landscape. But what the people in the building behind me are doing is studying the potentially transformation of the political landscape, in particular, perhaps the return of a new type of three-party politics. Now, I want you to take a look at this. It's the first YouGov poll for Sky News and The Times, the first voting intention poll since the general election. Here's what it shows. It shows Labour first, Labour top on 26%. It shows Reform UK, the new party at the general election, on 25%, and the Tories on 22%. And there you can see on your screen the smaller parties doing less well. What does it tell us? Well, it tells us Labour's still in front, just about, but it's 9 percentage points down from where it was at the general election, with Reform snapping at its heels within the margin of error, and the Tories there on third, 2 months into Kemi Badenoch's time leading that party. Now, Anna, this poll is predicated on the idea that there's a general election tomorrow, and there is not going to be a general election tomorrow. You should look at it as a broad indication of some of the trends in our politics at the moment, but those trends are being closely studied by the people behind me who take two lessons away from it. First of all, look at the success of Nigel Farage's Reform Party. They think that means that there's going to be a more challenging, populist challenge for them at the next election. Secondly, with the Tories in the doldrums on third, there is a real chance that maybe at some point in this Parliament, Reform UK and the Tory party end up trying to do some kind of deal. And that is worrying the people inside Number 10. Could those two percentages combine together to overtake Labour by a long margin? That's the kind of opposition that they could face later on in the coming years. The question is, can they stay on top of it in the building behind me?
Sam and Tom too, thank you. Now, Scotland's former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has announced that she and husband Peter Morrell have decided to end their marriage. She tied the knot with the SNP's former chief executive back in 2010, but says they've been separated for some time now. Both were questioned by police in 2023 as part of an inquiry over the party's finances, but deny wrongdoing. The family of two sisters missing in Scotland have appealed for help from the public to help find them. Police divers have been searching the River Dee in Aberdeen for 32-year-olds Eliza and Henrietta Husty, who were last seen on CCTV after leaving their home on Tuesday afternoon. Their families say it is a very worrying and upsetting time. Tyson Fury has announced his retirement from boxing. It comes after the former heavyweight world champion suffered back-to-back defeats to Alexander Usyk in his last two fights. He had been tipped for a big money bout against Anthony Joshua later this year. The COVID inquiry resumes tomorrow, and one of the things it's considering is making recommendations about the use of social media and its role in spreading misinformation and disinformation around vaccines. It's feared the effect of anti-vax campaigns is continuing even now, with some areas still showing a fall in the number of children receiving the MMR jab. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has more.
The mystery twins have had their prayers answered. Gunnock was waiting for his COVID vaccine when he caught the virus and almost died during the pandemic. He spent more than 2 weeks in intensive care.
They tried the oxygen first and then that didn't work, so they had to put me on the ventilator. And luckily that worked. So
Luckily.
You
wouldn't be here otherwise.
No.
Gunnock was a postman who walked miles every day. Now he lives with long COVID, which means he can barely manage a step.
I still struggle to walk, at any distance, and I struggle to do my housework, and I get help to do my washing and cleaning. I can't do. I have to get someone in to help with the cleaning.
His twin brother was a COVID champion and a contributor to the Inquiry's Every Story Matters campaign. Kirit helped local health leaders to get their message through to sometimes hard-to-reach communities. How difficult was it to engage with some of those South Asian communities during the pandemic to try and increase the vaccine uptake?
I think a lot of the misinformation was coming from, from our own countries back home, also from in this country as well. And it was people may have lost somebody, and hence they put it down to vaccination was the cause of that. So it was really trying to get people to understand that, being hesitant is, and working on the misinformation is not the right way, because we needed to protect ourselves.
Leicester spent more time under COVID restrictions than anywhere else in the country. Around 8% of the people here said they didn't intend to take the vaccine. That's double the national average. The East Midlands has also seen a decrease in the number of children being vaccinated against measles, mumps and rubella every year since 2021. Will the chair have any power herself to stop social media being abused for misinformation or disinformation purposes?
We will be looking specifically at misinformation and disinformation and whether that led to vaccine hesitancy. I'm not going to try to preempt the evidence that she might hear or the recommendations that she's going to make, but she's determined to make sure that the UK is better prepared for the next emergency.
Falling levels of childhood vaccines means that England no longer has the population immunity recommended by the World Health Organization to prevent future outbreaks of illnesses like measles, meningitis and polio, leaving vulnerable communities more exposed than ever. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Leicester.
Well, we're reporting tonight from Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. And when the fires came last week, this was the place where people who were fleeing the hills behind me got stuck in traffic and abandoned their cars in panic as the flames leapt from these hills onto these cars. The authorities had to bring in bulldozers to push a way through, and you can see the molten aluminium on the floor just shows how incredibly hot the fires were raging here. And there is a great deal of anger still here about whether or not the authorities could have done more to prevent devastation like this and whether lessons have been learned. And these are questions that I put to the authorities at a press briefing a little earlier today. A couple of questions. One to Fire Chief Moroney. More bad winds on the way. We know the conditions, as we've just heard, are going to be the same as last week. How confident are you that you're better prepared this time? And also a question for Mayor Bass, if I might. Our correspondent David Blevins asked you last week if you owe the people of Los Angeles an apology for cutting the fire budget. You didn't respond to him then. Would you like to respond to us now?
So for the fire question, thank you. We're absolutely better prepared for this coming PDS, the severe fire weather event.
My focus is on us being prepared as a city for tomorrow. As you began, we could face another very difficult situation for thousands of Angelenos. When we are past this period, there will be an evaluation of everything that went on. And at that point in time, we will see there is not agreement as to whether or not the budget was cut.
And there are a lot of evaluations and questions already being asked about Elon Musk here last night talking to firefighters, and we think that President Trump is potentially going to come and visit next week. But really the crucial time is the next 24 hours. People here are just watching and waiting. There are an enormous amount of army trucks and fire engines all lined up along the seafront here in Los Angeles. They think they are better prepared for this evening's weather. We shall just have to wait and see.
Yes, fingers crossed, certainly. Jane Secker, thank you. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgart. Great to see both of you. Welcome. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front page of The Telegraph. Its headline, the PM throws Reeves's future into doubt. Back with that and plenty more in just a moment.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. The mayor of Los Angeles has refused to apologise for the way she's handled the wildfire crisis, which has torn through the city over the last 7 days. At least 24 people are now known to have died, a figure which it is feared will still rise. A man accused of driving his partner, Kiana Dawes, to suicide through sustained domestic violence has been cleared of her manslaughter. But a jury found Ryan Wellings guilty of controlling or coercive behaviour towards her. And the Prime Minister has promised the UK will be an AI superpower in a bid to boost economic growth and create thousands of new jobs. Hello there, you're watching the Press Preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott. Welcome and great to see both of you. So as ever, let's take a look at the front pages, starting with the Daily Telegraph. It leads with Sir Keir Starmer's refusal today to commit to Rachel Reeves remaining as Chancellor until the next election. Downing Street later clarified that she would be staying. The Daily Mail describes Ms Reeves and the City Minister, Tulip Siddiq too, as two lame ducks. The latter is facing questions about her interactions with the Bangladeshi government. The Guardian writes that the Prime Minister is backing his Chancellor, and the Star ponders whether it's too soon to make comparisons between Rachel Reeves and Liz Truss and buy themselves another lettuce. The Eye says the government may cut benefits in what it calls a search for new savings. The Times leads with a story on what it calls a threat to free speech, as it reports that pubs could ban customers from speaking on contentious matters. The FT has a story concerning Russian gas tankers being repaired at European shipyards. Daily Express speaks to a farmer who's concerned at the government's decision to continue levying inheritance tax against agricultural landowners. The Metro has the story of Kiana Dawson, whose ex-boyfriend, Ryan Wellings, was today found guilty of assaulting and coercively controlling her, but found not guilty of her manslaughter. Well, we're joined then by Jack and Jessica. Plenty to talk about, not least the Chancellor and her future. A number of newspapers clearly going on this. It was the speech from the PM about AI, railroaded again by the bond markets and the cost of borrowing. Why don't you kick off then, Jack, with the Daily Telegraph?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a torrid time, really, for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. You wind back to before the election. She was the shadow chancellor who could walk on water. She could do no wrong, she got businesses on side, and she really did help drag Labour back to that position where they could be fiscally credible, help them win the election. And since then, it has been all downhill. You think about the winter fuel cut to 10 million pensioners. You think about the farmers' inheritance tax, the budget where the OBR said we were going to get anaemic growth at best, questions over her CV, and now we have bond yields at their highest in about 30 years. So it hasn't been very good for Rachel Reeves of late, and of course that has now prompted questions about her future. Keir Starmer today twice refused to say that she would be the Chancellor by the next election. Number 10 then forced to almost row back on this and do a bit of a clean-up operation later on, saying she would be Chancellor before the next election. The problem is that no one's really sure where they stand, and now you have a bit of a two-tier cabinet where some people have been declared safe, others haven't. It's a bit like an episode of The Traitors, I guess, isn't it?
I'm not sure we go that far. But yes, another picture of Rachel. Everyone talked about how at PMQs last Wednesday, you know, she looked deeply concerned and deep in thought, you know, the weight of the world on her shoulders. How's your paper reporting this then? I'm just trying to, yes, you have written it. I'm just double checking. Yes. But anyway, so, so what's the feeling from The Guardian then?
So, I mean, obviously Keir Starmer's found himself in this quite ridiculous situation for a new Prime Minister where he's having to commit to keeping his cabinet there for the entire of this Parliament. And that's because at one point a spokesman said that David Lammy would be there for the whole Parliament. And now it's sort of judged on that measure of whether anyone's going to be there for the entire time, which would be the first time in a very long time that an entire cabinet stays the same. Look, nobody has been more closely associated with the kind of Keir Starmer project, the renewal of the Labour Party and this election victory, that reputation for fiscal credibility than Rachel Reeves. That, you know, when you hear Rachel Reeves talks, she often talks about we. She uses that we to describe her and Keir Starmer, this kind of PM and Chancellor walking in lockstep, very much modelled on the idea of David Cameron and George Osborne rather than Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And to see how You know, at the moment, that's still the case about the closeness between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. Where the doubts are emerging is probably on the Labour backbenches. You know, people saying that they expect, you know, the winter fuel allowance, I think, was one of the things that sort of set a few worries going in the Labour backbenches. But looking at what's happened now to, you know, in the bond markets, seeing how even, you know, a really tough budget, which included a huge amount of public spending, you know, seems to be spooking the markets in a way that does make us a slight international outlier. There obviously are international factors in it, but there still seems to be things, particularly the national insurance rise for employers, that have really made people think, is Britain the best place to invest?
Yeah, and interestingly, the Daily Telegraph lists all sorts of things, actually. The turmoil in Britain's financial markets continued today. Oil prices soaring, raising concerns about inflation once again. The pound fell to a new 14-month low. Goldman Sachs, one of the banks, forecasting that sterling will fall to 120 against the dollar over the next year. This is on top of Sir Keir twice, not quite saying that she'll be there for the duration. So the question is, does there need to be some emergency statement? What do they do about it? And we remember Rachel Reeves saying that what had happened to Liz Truss haunted her, and that is why she was so cautious. And yet she has the same issue of the cost of borrowing that Liz Truss had. So she must be feeling, you know, deeply concerned about
She's
this.
definitely feeling under the cosh, especially because you said she was the first one out of the gate when Liz Truss was, you know, putting the economy down the Swanee, putting the boot in.
Not allowed to say crashing the economy. You've got a cease and desist.
Well, yeah, sorry, no, I don't want a legal letter coming through the door. I think Jess is totally right, though. I don't think there are serious discussions at the moment about Rachel Reeves being sacked by Keir Starmer. This is not a Blair-Brown relationship where they are at loggerheads together and Tony Blair only finds out the budget scorecard the day before the budget itself. You know, they are in lockstep. This is Keir Starmer's budget as much as it is Rachel Reeves. They are so allied to each other. If you sack your Chancellor, as Liz Truss did with Kwasi Kwarteng, then you might be the next one to go. So I don't think there's any serious discussion of that happening. In terms of an economic package, well, Rachel Reeves, again, and we talk about her boxing herself in a lot. She's boxed herself in with the fact she's only committed to have one fiscal statement a year. That's going to be the budget in sometime in the autumn. There will be a spring statement where the OBR gives their forecast, and it's not looking pretty positive at the moment. And so we have this speech, I think, by Darren Jones coming next week, and it's trailed a bit in your paper, Jess, where she says that Darren Jones is going to be getting ruthless with cabinet colleagues, and they're going to have to be finding efficiency savings in their department. But, you know, with an already very tight spending review envelope, where the fat is going to be trimmed remains to be seen at the moment.
Indeed, and we saw pictures of her in China. People said she shouldn't have gone to China, etc., but she did. The Eye talks about its benefits that is going to hit the squeeze. Specifically, I think they say disability benefits. The disability benefits bill is now fully on the agenda, as it was always going to be fair, at this time of year, wasn't it?
Yes, and then we're waiting for the results of their look at personal independence payments, which is the ones where the costs have been really rising. Adults are, you know, with disabilities. What can they do to tweak that? Maybe change the eligibility criteria. Maybe make some, you know, require more proof for certain conditions. They might decide that they're going to do a sort of tiered system where at the moment you can either be awarded it or not. So people tend toward giving the most severe awards. Could you give people slightly less if they don't have much less of a disability? I think that there's all of those things are kind of being talked about. But, you know, this has been in the sights of officials in Whitehall for a long time, very much was in the sights of the Tories. And if you are going to have, which we think they will, much more of a fiscal event, as they call it, not a budget. Should we call it a mini budget? But no, in the spring, then looks like this will be the focus of it.
Yeah, OK, and the Daily Mail going for a double whammy of two lame ducks, isn't it? Because the anti-corruption minister is being urged not to recuse herself from corruption issues. But anyway, tell us more about these, the front pages of the Daily Mail's handling of all
yeah,
this.
I mean, this is a vintage Mail front page. Two lame ducks, two Treasury ministers pictured on there, both having pretty miserable times at the moment. We've chatted about Rachel Reeves. Her junior minister, Tulip Siddiq, is under investigation by the number 10 Standards Commissioner for potential breaches of the ministerial code. It stems back to her aunt, who was the sort of despotic ruler of Bangladesh until very recently. Tulip Siddiq was given a few houses by allies of that despotic regime.
Just a few houses.
Just a few houses.
Given to live in.
Given to live in, exactly, properties of that. And so questions now about her ties to that regime. She denies any wrongdoing. Quite funnily today, she was caught outside her house and was smirking as broadcasters suggested to her that she might be the unluckiest anti-corruption minister in history. And now a couple of charities, the UK Anti-Corruption Coalition, have called on her to resign because it's now getting to a point where it's almost farcical, I think, where she holds this brief of being the anti-corruption minister while being investigated to links to a corrupt regime. And so I think there's now pressure building for her to resign. And I think we've all seen this movie before and we see how it ends.
Yeah, the right-leaning papers are sniffing blood, aren't they? That's the point. Daily Star tops it off with the lettuce suggestion that it's time to buy another one. Anyway, ... We'll see what happens. But your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think that if you were to buy a lettuce and have it and leave it until Rachel Reeves is sacked, then it would be a pretty rotten lettuce. I think it would be basically liquid in the bottom of the fridge. I think she's got quite a long way to go. But the fact that we're seeing this 6 months into a Labour government, I think, you know, it won't be
from a very confident chancellor whose wings are being clipped, I think.
Yeah, and so closely associated with the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and you, the lettuce is well rotten, is it, before...
I think so. I don't think there's any serious prospect currently of Rachel Reeves being sacked or forced to quit anytime soon, although I do like the Star's thought for the day, which says, will Rachel Reeves romaine?
Anyway, we're now talking about the rot level of a lettuce around the Chancellor. It's not ideal for number 11, is it? Lots more still to come, including some MPs are changing their minds over the need for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. That and plenty more in just a moment.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
President for a second time.
That reason being to save our country, he said.
A remarkable moment, isn't it?
Another chance, another 4 years. The question is, what does he do with those 4 years?
Watch the inauguration of Donald Trump as he becomes president for the second time.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
The full story, first on Sky News.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you wanted to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Well, you're watching the press preview with me once again, Jack Elsom and Jessica Elgott. Welcome back to both of you. Let's head to the Telegraph, shall we, Jessica? And this pressure for a national inquiry into grooming gangs, which many MPs had said, we know the information, it's just going to delay action. Some of those MPs are beginning to change their mind, is what this is saying.
And it feels like those MPs were sort of following after Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, said that he, might be in favour of a limited inquiry that was drawing the lessons on from these local inquiries to see where are the patterns across the country. And Sarah Champion, the MP for Rotherham, obviously, that hotspot for one of these big scandals, said that she has now said that she doesn't think that anything less than that will be able to truly learn the lessons. Paul Ward, the new MP for Rochdale, also saying, that he thinks that there's a case for it. So perhaps there is a bit of momentum building for it. I think that the government's probably at the stage now is hoping that maybe some of this is kind of dropping off the agenda and it can go back to doing what it wants to do, which is these locally focused inquiries. But we'll see if pressure starts to come from Labour MPs, it might start to build up again.
The pressure from Elon Musk, he's moved on to something else, is the point, I suppose.
Well, also maybe the pressure from their constituents. You can imagine, because last week when they had this vote, obviously, and listen, like you can argue about the vote itself. It was obviously crowbarred in there by the Tories and was never going to be acceptable to Labour. However, we didn't see last week many Labour MPs break ranks with their leadership and call for that national inquiry. And I just wonder whether this trickle of Labour MPs coming out now, especially lots of them in those hotspot areas which were most afflicted by the grooming scandal, maybe their postbags are absolutely bursting with voters who are saying, no, we want a national inquiry. We don't really think that this country has had its moment of reckoning over this scandal, and we'd like to see our day in court. And, I think that there was a poll last week which showed that about 74% of the public actually would support a national inquiry. Now, whether Keir Starmer actually acts on this, I think remains to be seen. Probably not. He's been pretty resolute in his view that we don't need another inquiry on top of the J report, which reported back in 2021. They are more focused now on implementing those recommendations. The problem is, as well, is that it's very difficult to get a uniform view with victims. We have Number 10 saying that we're going to be led by the victims in our response. But there's not one homogenous view with that, because some victims are saying we want J recommendations to go forward and we don't want another national inquiry. It's a bit even traumatic to open this up again. But then you have other victims who say that's exactly what we want. So it's a really fine balancing act, which the government are doing. I can't see them giving into this national inquiry anytime soon.
Let's go abroad then, shall we now? Critical prospects of a ceasefire now in Gaza, the release of the hostages held since October the 7th, more than a year ago. Certainly tonight, Joe Biden saying it's coming closer to fruition. High-level talks in Qatar tomorrow for final details is how they've described it. But, everyone's waiting to see, with the deadline, of course, the sense of a deadline, the inauguration of Donald Trump next week.
Yes, and it very much feels like all of the leaders in the region see that inauguration of Donald Trump as the deadline to get a deal done in order to release these hostages and finally end, the terrible turmoil, trauma that the people of Gaza have been through during this bombardment. It seems like the deal is very, very close. It's 14 months of war now, and the final draft seems to be there now for tweaks in Qatar, and it's the closest I think we've got in these 14 months.
Yes, and we see Joe Biden there, his final foreign policy speech. It's the end of a very long, decades-long political career for him. The final few days, we'll see what else comes up, and certainly keep a close eye on those talks in Qatar. In the meantime, The Times suggesting that pub chat will be controlled and dictated because of Labour policy, a Labour law. So explain this one to us if you can.
Yes, interesting story in the front of The Times tomorrow. This revolves around this employment rights bill, one of Labour's flagship pieces of legislation that affords sweeping rights to employers, one of which is freedom from harassment in the workplace. And so The Times have picked up on a sort of small quirk of this, which is that people behind bars will be immune under this law to any sort of harassment. But the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the sort of watchdog on equality in this country, has said that a byproduct of that could be that people would have to limit themselves in terms of banter, talking about religious views, views on transgender rights in pubs and bars under this law. And so barmaids and landlords could potentially kick out anyone who sort of breaches that right. And, obviously it's going to provoke a bit of a free speech row.
Yeah, very interesting. Jack Elsom, Jessica Elgott, as ever, thank you. We'll see more from you both in the 11. Right now, let's take a peek at the weather, shall we? And a southwesterly flow is making it milder for most parts, but southern Britain will take time to warm up. There'll be a mostly mild start tomorrow then, with low cloud, hill fog and some drizzly outbreaks over central parts. The clearer south may see some pockets of frost and fog again. The morning will be rather dull overall, hill fog, further patchy drizzle over much of Ireland and central Britain. Most other places, though, will be dry. Well, coming up next on Sky News at 11, our press preview will continue. More of our look at the newspapers with our guests tonight, Jack Elsom and Jessica Elgott. Back in just a moment.